Hey everyone, what we're going to do today is a poison tail hair jig. In the vise I got a 1/8 ounce poison tail jig. I have it painted in brown um, with a size 1 mustad hook. Um, what we're going to do is a little bit different. We're going to use a product. It's a fish skull, faux bucktail. Um, I messed with this when it first came out. Um, it's a synthetic bucktail, but unlike all the other ones, it's actually tapered, and I really like it. The only thing I tell you is if you're gonna get this, and it sounds like a lot of money for one of these, but there's a lot of material. You get a ton of this stuff, um, and it does act pretty much like bucktail. The only thing is, don't use your fine scissors. This stuff is really tough to cut. I got to use at the end of the season before I got off the water, so I do have a little experience working with it. We're going to start out with some 210 denier flat wax nylon thread in a coffee brown and get our base started. And if you'll notice, I forgot to tell you, you'll see that that lead showing there. On these poison tail jigs, they have a really uh, big collar. And when you tie hair jigs with that, it tends to really uh, flare the material out almost too much. So what I did was I took a little diagonal cutters and I snipped it off just to shorten it. And that's one of the reasons for this faux bucktail. And I am not associated with Fish Skull or anybody else. I'm just telling you what I use. Um, this stuff doesn't flare. If you want it to flare, you'll have to use an alternative tying method, like tying a chenille ball or something to make it really flare. Um, Otherwise, it won't flare a whole lot on you, which is good. So let's get started here. I already cut the material, so save some time. And it is tapered, but what you have to do is you have to take the ends and move them around a little bit. I just like to go like this, and there you go. You lose that paintbrush effect like you get with other synthetic bucktails. So we're gonna tie our first little clump in, and I put it a little bit above because when you cinch this down, it has a tendency to slip a little bit too. It's very slick material, but it does act like bucktail in the water pretty much. It gives you that nice profile. So uh, when I use it on a few more different patterns, we'll see. But so far, I like it. So I'm gonna tie that first clump in, and I'm gonna move it around. To get the coverage I need. And you see we have a little hole there for an FG12 weed guard, 5/64 of an inch diameter, a little bit heavier than the 16th inch. Now I got some wraps. We're going to take our second clump of this faux bucktail. If I can pick it up. And the same thing. If you want the ends not to be like a paintbrush. So what I do is I just go in between my fingers like this and move them up and down at the same time, and your ends will start moving around, and uh, it'll look natural when you tie it in. I'm gonna have to trim that up a little bit, and for that, oh no, where did they go? Uh, I got these scissors. Guess where they came from? The hospital. Had to have sutures taken out, and I asked the doctor. I said, since I'm paying for them, can I have the suture kit, the scissors? And they gave them to me. So lucky me. I don't got to trim too much off of this stuff, just a little bit. But it is tougher to cut than bucktail, so don't ruin a good pair of scissors. Get yourself either, God forbid, you have to have sutures taken out, or you had to have them put in the first place. But pair of craft store scissors, something other than your fine cutting scissors, will work, because it will be hard on them, guaranteed. I like doing that because it helps me by pulling it down. It helps me separate it and get it even on both sides of the hook. That was one of the things I struggled with early on when I was learning to tie, is getting the material even. I'd have it too heavy on one side, and what it did was it caused the jig to fall strange. Sometimes that works in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. And pull some out of there. Got a little bit too heavy for what I want to do. And this is, I apologize that this is the hardest part with this material, is once you get it in, it's like I said, it's very slick. It is nice once you get used to it. I've been tying with it, but not enough to be very proficient with it. So now I got my base brown faux bucktail in there. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this orange baitfish silicone, just just for some color, and I'm going to want it just a little bit short at the ends of our fake bucktail. And it's going to make 2 wraps, and then I'm going to take the silicone strands. I got 5 strands here. I'm going to take each individual strand, and I'm going to move them around so I have the silicone on wrapped evenly all the way around the jig. If I can ever get a hold of it. There we go. Five strands isn't too much, I don't think. I think it's just perfect. It gives it a little bit of color while not being overly aggressive, and adds a little bit of bulk and some action. And we could trim them ends up or pull them back a little bit. I apologize for taking a little bit too long here. And we'll start tying that in. Now what I'd like to do is pull up and snip, and that way the silicone pulls back in and you don't have any cleanup work to do afterwards. And the silicone is tied in. Now I can start wrapping pretty tight. Okay, now the next step. We're going to take some olive bucktail. I'm going to trim the ends up there to make it a little neater. That always happens when you pre-cut your material. You pick it up and the ends get all messed up. That's no big deal though. We'll fix it. I'm going to start. And with this, you're going to want it a little shorter than your faux bucktail. right around even with your silicone. You're going to fan it out and get it that it's even all the way around. And we'll do the same thing with the bottom, or which is actually the top of the jig, but as we tie it, it's the bottom. Put some in there, a couple of strands to hold it, a couple of wraps I should say. Strand, getting used to working with that silicone too long. And wrap. Now these, when you get that, when you get the olive bucktail tied in, cinch it down pretty tight, because that's, you're going to need to do that to get a little bit of extra flare out of it. Pull our short pieces out. Now, for all intents purposes, this is done. If you're going to tie this pattern exactly the way I do it, you're pretty much done at this point. But what I'm going to do is add something a little extra, and this is something I haven't fished with, but I was at a fishing show, and I ran into a guy selling fly tying stuff, and he had some hackle feathers there, and they're light colored with that real dark centering, and I thought, boy, that would make like a nice lateral line on this jig that I was specifically wanting to tie for you. So I decided, you know what, we're going to try it out. So let's see what happens when we put our lateral line feather in here. One side. Wrap it up. Well, that ain't too shabby. Kind of like that. And we're going to whip finish. Trim off the excess, and our head cement. And we are finished. And that is our poison tail hair jig. And that's going to have a weed guard in it. I'm always messing up trying this. Find a way. I gotta find a way to display this stuff for you. And I'm gonna actually have a tank set up sometime in the near future so I could show you these things underwater. There you have it. Nice profile. This works. I haven't tried it with the feathers. The feathers are something new that I just added. But give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.